Welcome back. Hope you all had a good lunch, and those who are watching us online had a good break, wherever you are in the world. We are going to continue our dialogue on minds, artificial intelligence, and ethics with the second session on entanglement or disentanglement between human and artificial intelligence. And I would like to introduce Kate Nave, a member of the planning committee and facilitator of this session, and the floor is yours, Kate.
Welcome back to everyone in the room and everyone on the live stream. It's such a privilege to be here. In this session, we're going to be talking about questions of disentanglement and meaningful relationships. And when it comes to the question of whether we should allow ourselves to become entangled with AI, in one sense, it feels like a question too late, in that these systems are already entangled into our society, and the question is really how we navigate that in ways that enhance rather than constrain our freedom. Part of that is recognizing that this is not a new problem. Human societies have always created technologies that we don't merely use, but that shape us in turn. Mathematics, language are two such technologies. But we also recognize that the rate at which these technologies are developing is uniquely risky, because it's reducing our ability to take the time to assimilate them in ways that open up new possibilities, rather than constraining and limiting us. The problem in many cases is that AI systems seem to push us not only to seek out more predictable and manageable interactions, but sometimes push us into becoming more predictable and manageable ourselves. And that ease of management can be dangerous, because much of what makes our activities meaningful, whether those activities are intellectual pursuits or human relationships, much of what makes them meaningful is that they cost us something. They require effort and investment. Reducing that effort may be adaptive in the short term, but in the longer term, we worry that it can undermine our resilience and our creative capabilities. Recognizing that capabilities like our ability to make commitments to one another, to empathize with one another, and to transform our relationships with one another, recognizing that those capacities are tied to our capacity to be vulnerable, also casts a different light on this question of entanglement, namely towards thinking about how these systems are entangled with us. Insofar as AI systems lack the vulnerability that we possess, to what extent are the capabilities that we attribute to them really dependent upon their relation to us? And how would the capacities of those systems change if you took human engagement out of the loop? Those are some of the questions that we're really excited to discuss with you all here today. First up, we have Geshe Sangpo, Director of the Science Center at Gyeonggi Monastic University, to talk about the mental qualities that our entanglements with AI are placing at risk. Then it will be Anat Perry, Associate Professor of Psychology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and currently a Radcliffe Fellow at Harvard, who will be speaking on what we value about human empathy and the limitations of what AI has to offer. After that, it'll be myself. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in philosophy at the University of Edinburgh, and I will speak about the difference between the creative potential of living systems, the capabilities of artificial ones, and the dangers of confusing them. And then finally, we will have Peter Hershok, co-founder of the Buddhism and AI Initiative and Senior Adjunct Fellow at the East-West Center in Honolulu, who will talk about the karmic dynamics at play in our interactions with AI and how we can evolve alongside these systems in a beneficial way. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Hello. Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Geshe Sangpo from Gandhin Changze Monastery. And I just want to share kind of my feeling, It is some kind of mixtures of the feeling. It is a little bit joyful because, I'm getting this opportunity to serve His Holiness Dalai Lama's vision. At the same time, I keep reminding, participating in the previous kind of, the minded dialogue, looking from the behind and observing His Holiness Dalai Lama's, very, humor, in his, sense of humor, and and asking, very critical questions, and his, absence is, very saddening. And I'm feeling kind of nervous and this kind of mixture sort of emotion because partly I'm a human, not AI. Okay. So okay, I just dive into my presentation. The topic, as introduced by Kate, the topic is entanglement or disentanglement, and the meaningful relationship with AI. As we all know, AI is getting into every aspect of human life, and it is rapidly growing, progressing, and its advancement surely has its own kind of significant purpose and usefulness. But whether it proved to be a more kind of great assets or liability is very much dependent on how it is developed and applied. And along this, usefulness, and I think we also need to consider on the risk that comes along with it. In this era of AI, I think academically we can gain so much. The accelerating, collecting so much information in a very short spans of time. But on the other hand, we may compromise or inner flourishing because everything interacting with the technology. And Buddhists emphasize on the importance of inner flourishment, not the outwardly kind of progression. If we look into the history, if we try to see the correlation between the scientific kind of progression and mental improvements, the mental development, there's no correlation. So scientifically, progression does not mean enhancing or kind of mental well-being. The risk, for example, when we heavily rely on AI, AI actually reduces our active mental engagement and creative work, and weakening actually when AI does provide everything very instantaneously and fulfills or demands effortlessly, and over the time we may addicted to convenience and gradually lose our motivation to invest any kind of mental effort to accomplish anything. Recent actually scientific findings, I think the pilot studies suggest that frequently using tools like ChatGPT reduces cortical thickness. So to protect our cognitive growth and originality, I think we really need to take serious consideration and cautious how we deeply integrate AI into our day-to-day life. And then I also want to talk with respect to the emotion. In Buddhism, kind of the teachings at the very early age introduces different types of emotion to be conversant, understanding different categories of emotions, their causes and their nature, and their kind of the behavioral outcomes, and the tools or instructions how for coping with this kind of afflictive emotions. And most importantly, I think the Buddhism emphasizes on the importance of cultivating positive emotions like compassion, loving kindness. So this cultivation later becomes the driving force for us deepening our human to human connection and generating sense of care and generating sense of universal responsibility. And with respect to this kind of emotion in the context of AI, my concern is not AI becoming like a human. Rather, human beings become like a AI. And my concern is mostly toward to the young generations or the future generations, because in the future the AI, may become a very integral part of, human life. And if these young generations, mostly interact with AI, particularly at the stages of their kind of critical development, then it will be very detrimental for their emotional growth. So, we may turn to like an AI, emotionally flat, plain, and in the process we miss so much, we lost so much. I think that is very crucial to take consideration. What is happening here? I got lost. Sorry. Sorry. Oops, it screams so fast. It's AI operating, I think, behind. And then I also, what? It's not going, I don't know. It is, just doing. Okay, it is just kind of an operating by itself. I don't know. Maybe the connection is lost. I don't know. No, I want the emotion slide. Okay, this one. And you see, AI actually, I think this, topic is raised in the, morning session as well. AI does not, have genuine feeling and genuine or warmth or depth of the emotional kind of expressions, emotional cues that we get it from human. They don't have the physical kind of body language, the magnitude of that body language that we receive from the human. But when we interact with human, we do read these signals and respond with care and understanding, and that is how we actually enhance our connection, enhance our empathy and compassion. And by noticing when someone is sad, when someone is upset, when someone is excited, and through that way, we grow together. But AI actually, absence of that kind of magnitude, that kind of warmth. So because of that, I think we need. It is very important for us to take this kind of, the dimension into consideration. And the second point, AI, smooths over discomforts and give very easy answer and minimizing conflict, and gradually actually lowering our tolerance for the emotional distress. And then third point here, what I wanted to share with regard to the emotion is resilience come from different kind of struggles, and we need to face it. We need to, if you just look at examples like a great leaders, His Holiness Dalai Lama or the Nelson Mandela or Gandhi, they have gone through so much, and through their kind of, adversity, they turn it into a more kind of, their mental exercise and for their growth and for to be who they are. So therefore, I think we miss that component in AI too as well. So that is also a big sort of a consideration. Then the third point, with respect to the memory, we all know that in Buddhism teachings, we get tools or the instructions for sustaining our thinking, enhancing our kind of an attention spans. And when we let AI do everything, for examples like giving a very simple prompt, and then let AI do all the categorization and making the bullet points, and letting the AI tell the whole story. So it can be efficient, it can save time, but it really shortens our attention spans. It really makes us harder to stay in focus and sustain our thinking. So one thing is that when we actually jumps between tasks and looking only at a small bit of content, then our mind loses opportunity to embrace the full picture, embrace the details that comes in the kind of, the other kind of processes. So therefore, there is a risk for, the memory consolidation, and moreover, the AI addictive designs of AI power apps keeps our attention fragmented, and this frequent distraction actually interferes our mental ability to encode or the store information, and weakening some kind of the memory sort of information, I think. And in the long run, our ability to retain knowledge or ability to recall great informations are at risk. And to sum up, with respect to this kind of the three core sort of the areas, I think if we continuously heavily relying on AI and let them do thinking, remembering, and all other kind of things, then in the process we lose the strength needs for inner growth. One kind of simple example that I could come up with is like GPS. We all it's relatable to all of us. I think when we heavily rely on GPS to navigate through the streets and through the passage, and we can remember where we have been through, the streets and the blocks, name of the blocks. So the memory kind of consolidation is compromising that process. So in the traveling under the guidance of the the GP is like more like a digital traveling. And when you travel by using your own kind of brain, it is more like a traveling, mindfulness traveling. So the difference between these two is very obvious, very experiential, I think. So therefore, I think, so this, I have a few more things to say, but respecting to the time, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Your next slide.
Hello, everyone. First, I want to say how wonderful it is to be here today and to thank Mind and Life for this invitation to such a special event. I'm ready for my presentation. And I'm Anat Perry. I'm a social cognitive neuroscientist who studies empathy for quite a while now. And I want to share with you a question that I've been asking myself and thinking about for the last 2 years. And it starts with a tweet I saw on then Twitter 2.5 years ago from a company called Coco. So their CEO, Rob Morris, wrote this tweet explaining that Coco is a peer-to-peer support platform. What this means is that they have millions of users who can go to this platform on whatever app they prefer, write something they're going through, or suggest support to someone else. So humans both ask for support and give support. And when ChatGPT just came out, they thought it could be a good idea to use ChatGPT as help for their supporters. So not instead of the supporters. They suggested something like this. Someone could go to their platform and write what they're going through. So this is a real example they give. I'm trying to become a better me and having a hard time. It's easier not to. A real human emotion, right? Feeling. And then the supporter could write their own support or click what they called CocoBot, which would send this to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT would offer their support. And this looked something like this. Now, we won't have time to read the whole thing, but you'll have to believe me that this is a very empathic response. It works very well. And now the supporter could decide to just send it as is, or edit it, or write something completely new altogether. And they've used it with around 4,000 supporters in around 30,000 messages. And the recipients said that these responses were super helpful and super empathic, and were actually much faster than regular responses. And yet, they pulled this from their platform very quickly. And the question is why? And this is the original tweet by Rob Morris. It's fine if you can't read it. It's exactly what I've told you until now. And here he asks why. And he says, once people learned the messages were co-created by a machine, it didn't work. Simulated empathy feels weird, empty. Machines don't have lived human experience. So when they say, that sounds hard, or I understand, it sounds inauthentic. And you can also see this by many of the responses that this tweet now has, basically saying how unethical this is and what were they thinking. And this made me wonder, could AI be empathic? And what does that even mean? And maybe more importantly, what do we as humans value in human empathy? And this is a question that has lots of technological and ethical implications, thinking about what kinds of technology we want to build, but also very basic philosophical and psychological implications, trying to understand deeply what we mean when we say empathy and what we value in receiving it. And to understand that, I want to give you a broad explanation of the term empathy as we use it today in our labs. And in the very broad sense, empathy encompasses a cognitive dimension, our ability to take the other's perspective and to understand their emotional state, an affective perspective, sharing their pain, sharing their joy, sharing some of their experiences, and a lot of this has been referred to today. And also a motivational aspect, what some call empathic care, which is really this signaling to the other person that we do want to alleviate their suffering. Now, we know a lot from research about the empathizer side. We know that there are many values to empathizing with others. It has a good effect on our well-being, on our relationships. But we also know it has costs. We know there's empathic and compassion fatigue. We know that we empathize more with close others, with our in-group rather than our out-group. And we know that sometimes we prefer not to empathize. We may cross the street and not look at a homeless person, or close the radio not to hear something disturbing. Now let's switch sides and look at this from the recipient's perspective. How does it feel to receive empathy? And let's think about receiving empathy from AI. This goes on and off again, so I hope this works. When we think about cognitive empathy, I want to claim that I think AI will be able to do this quite well. And it does so quite well even today. But now think of an AI that's also connected to your watch, knows your physiological signals, knows your calendar, and it can say, well, Peter, you may think you woke up angry this morning, but actually you haven't slept so well, you're still jet lagged, and you're preparing for your talk, so you may be stressed or tired. But effective empathy, it can't really give you. We've just heard it doesn't really experience the world the same way that we do. And so when it says it feels your pain or it shares your experience, it's just faking it. And people sometimes fake empathy too. But there's always the potential that someone is really feeling some of what you're feeling and experiencing some of your emotions with you. And I think a neglected aspect is a motivational aspect. When someone, since usually we know people maybe don't have time or are busy or are tired or doing something else, when someone actually sits with us and gives us genuine care and empathy, we know that they're doing this now. They're just here with us. They're not with their friends. They're not with their family. They're not doing anything else. And some of that is what we value in true empathy and care. And of course, when an AI says, I'm here for you, you're not alone, they could be saying that to a million other people, and they don't have these limited resources, these biological limited resources to give. Another way, I argue that what seems to be a limitation of human empathizers, the fact that we're biological beings with finite energy resources for care and support, is why our empathy will be valued or should be valued more than that of AI. But this is all in theory, and I'm an experimental psychologist, so I wanted to see some data to see if this is true. And this is what we did. We've just finished a line of 9 experiments run by my amazing, brilliant PhD student, Matan Rubin. I'll just share 2 quick ones with you today. In the first one, we had 1,000 participants online asked to share a recent emotional story that they were going through. And then we told half of them that they're going to receive a response from ChatGPT, and the other half that they're going to receive a response from another human participant. In fact, Everyone received responses that were AI generated, and we prompt ChatGPT to give very empathic responses. So now we know all responses were highly personalized and empathic and created in the same way. But we asked people to rate how much empathy they felt following this interaction, what are the different emotions they felt after it, how much help and support they received, and also if they got a human response. Did they think that this human may have used AI in some way to write this response? And I'll tell you later why I think this is important. And here are the results, and it's fine for those of you who don't know how to follow this graph. I'll show you the main findings, which are easy to follow. What you see here on the x-axis is the human condition and the AI condition, and on the y-axis, empathy. And so we see that all responses were rated as very empathic because it was a short, very empathic interaction. But still, with exactly identical responses, human responses were rated as more empathic. We see the same for positive emotions. So people felt more positive emotions after a perceived interaction with a human, and they also felt less negative emotions. So there were hardly any negative emotions in the human condition. But in the AI condition, even if it was very empathic, when ChatGPT says, I care about you, you're not alone, or I share your pain, you sometimes feel awkward. We got the same responses for support. And here's what I wanted to share with you. We also found that the more people thought, they knew they were in the human condition, but they thought this person had to use ChatGPT to write this response, or it was aided by ChatGPT in some way, the less support they felt. The less support, the less help, the less empathy, the less they wanted to keep communicating with this person. And I think I wanted to stress this point because some of us do it already on a daily basis. And I wanted to stress this difference between using ChatGPT to help your grammar or help your English and using it to something emotional and empathic. And so I hope I convinced you that people value human empathy more than they value it from AI. But how much more? And here's what we wanted to find out. And what we did is we asked now 500 new participants to write something emotional that they were going through. And then we asked them to choose. Do you want an immediate AI response right now? Or are you willing to wait 2 hours to receive a human response? And to another group, we said you had to wait 24 hours or 1 week or 2 months or 2 years. And Matan Rubin is still answering some of these people today. And we also asked them to write their reasons. And what we found is that around 40% of the people, no matter how long they needed to wait, wanted a human response. And I'll quickly share the reasons with you because I'm almost done with my time. Why did people choose AI? For obvious reasons, out of curiosity, and most of these experiments were done already 2 years ago, out of hesitation from a human response, which I think is important, and out of timing. They wanted a quick response. Why did people choose human? Because they wanted someone who could truly understand them, share some of their emotions, care for them, and maybe even alleviate their loneliness. To conclude, I think that while AI will be able to replace many aspects and is already replacing them and interactions, when what we need is empathy, especially emotional sharing and genuine care, human connection will be and should be valued more. And this has lots of implications, especially at a time where we're all suffering from an epidemic of loneliness and isolation and a mental health crisis. And people rightly opt to these easy options of finding an AI companion who always cares, always listens to you, always will be empathic and understand you and will be on your side. And we see examples of these from the news every day. And so I think this is a time to stop and think, what are the implications for these relationships to our human relationships, to our mental health and loneliness, both in the short term and in the long term, and to societal implications at large. And with this, I will thank my amazing lab who's done all of this work, funding agencies, including Mind and Life that funded some of my earlier work, and you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much in that. My talk, I'm going to be speaking as a philosopher, so it may be somewhat more abstract and less obviously important, but I find it important and I care about this stuff, so you're going to have to listen to me talk about it. I'm a philosopher of cognition, and I'm based at the University of Edinburgh. And today I want to talk specifically about creativity as a biological phenomenon. The reason I want to talk, oh, and I should say I would like my presentation, please. Thank you, beautiful. The reason I would like to talk about creativity is that I think one of the reasons in which we often feel so threatened by these new technologies is they seem to disturb the sense that we have that creativity is unique and human, that it's an exceptional capacity that only we have, and it's the last thing that an AI, that a machine would be able to take from us. My kind of contention is that that's the entire problem. It's that because we believe we see creativity as something that only humans can do, that leads us to misunderstand it in a way that makes it look like it can be replicated in machines. So kind of ironically, to preserve what's special about creativity, we need to sort of give it up a little bit and recognize that it is something that aspects of which are shared across the living world. And the problem with this focus on creativity as something special and unique to gifted humans is that it leads us to lump simpler organisms and artificial systems together. They're essentially kind of goal-directed machines. You give them an input, they respond to return to a target state. And in some ways, that isn't a bad description of, say, a neural network. If you give it an input, it will progressively change its internal state till it reaches the output that is most likely for that input. And that likeliness is just fixed through regularities in the data that it was trained on. What bothers me is it's sometimes stated that there's something kind of organic about that makes these systems like organisms. And that idea is based on this somewhat common view of organisms as being essentially in the business of minimizing external disruptions to preserve themselves in some target state. It's a view that was very popular in the mid-20th century, and it's seen a bit of a resurgence today in these predictive accounts of cognition, which some of which take this view that homeostatic regulation, preserving yourself, preserving your viability conditions, is the fundamental principle of biology. And cognition is just a complexification of that process. So, allowing yourself to preserve more complicated and varied states. I think that overlooks something that's actually very, very fundamentally different about a living system and a machine. And it's those kind of fundamental differences that I want to argue are the difference between an iterative process that leads to this kind of result on the left, and an iterative process that leads to this kind of radiation in possibilities. This former option, as I'm going to explain a little, is the kind of thing you risk getting when you have only machines in the loop. The problem is the fact that your process is degenerating in this way is not always going to be immediately obvious to you. It might generate lots of interesting things on the path to this sort of collapse. And the danger is that we confuse the first sort of process for the second and think that the life part that's only there in the second process isn't going to be necessary for creativity. So why think that the machine-machine only sort of process is going to degenerate like this? Well, I like this quote, which is from way back in 1998. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about goes back in the past. This is from one of the first philosophers of AI, Margaret Bowden. And writing in 1998, she could say this: almost all of today's creative computers are concerned only with exploring predefined conceptual spaces. So no fundamental novelties, comparable to, say, Picasso's invention of cubism, no such shocking surprises are possible. It's interestingly exactly the same point that was made by the first philosopher of AI, I think I can say that, Ada Lovelace, 150 years earlier. The question is it still true today? I like this example. I think most of us are aware that one of the limitations of these systems is they will commit plagiarism when you ask them to. What's interesting is that they will auto-plagiarize when you don't ask them to. So this is an image that Gary Marcus and Reed Southern got when they asked Midjourney to generate pictures of animated toys. That's all they asked for, and some other little details as well. But they didn't ask for anything much more specific. Now, most people, who recognizes this? What percentage of the room recognizes this? Cool, yeah, it's pretty widespread. That's good. If you didn't recognize this, you'd be astonished, because it's incredible. It's so coherent, it's expressive, it resonates with us. And my concern is that often when people don't recognize the source material that the generative product is based on, they over-attribute some sort of creative intention, some creative ability to the AI system. So this is another example. These are two images that these systems generate, and they look pretty, I mean, the one on the right is kind of disturbing, to be honest, but they look pretty impressive. But they are stills from relatively well-known video games. Now, this plagiarism is often talked about in terms of issues of copyright fraud. But for me, the particular concern is this tendency to be impressed because we don't know, because something's new to us, because it's novel to us, we mistake it for being something novel to the AI. The issue is that it's very, very difficult to actually measure that, the extent to which it is novel to the AI. So I think a better way of thinking about whether or not these systems can be creative, because of that difficulty of judging novelty compared to the training set, is to ask what happens when you take human beings out of the loop, when you train these models on the output of other models. That's something that's increasingly happening as companies are running out of new human-created data to train these on. And what you tend to get is this, which is a phenomenon often referred to as model collapse. So what happens at each stage here is what happens when the system has just been trained on the output of the previous stage. And the thing is, when people work on these kind of problems of model collapse, they often talk about this as an issue of loss of accuracy. So the system is increasingly drifting away from the true statistics of the real world. But if we're thinking about the creative potential of these systems, to drift away from reality is kind of what you want. So why does this not look creative? And I think the issue here is that it's not the fact that what we end up with is not the right particular bird or the right particular flower. It's that what you end up with is something that isn't particular at all. And you get this similar sort of issues with large language models as well. If you have them just interact with each other, there's a tendency, particularly with paraphrasing, there's a tendency for them to sort of resort to just repeating the same sort of stock phrases over and over again at each other. And in a sense, that shouldn't be surprising, because no matter the size of these enormous models, in a sense, what Bowden did say in the late 90s is kind of true today. They're still optimizing these fixed functions to find the most likely or highest scoring value in a fixed possibility space. And if you put two fixed possibility spaces together, they cannot go beyond the space that they began with. They don't have that sort of capability. They can only sort of push each other into smaller regions of the possibility space that they began with. Now, obvious concern isn't the same true of us. And this is where we can sort of feel like grumpy old people, but look at modern movies. Look at the repetitiveness of these movie posters. There's a sense in which you can be concerned that human creativity is also tending towards homogeneity. And it isn't just mass media. To come back to Picasso's transformative invention of cubism, we maybe thought that was extraordinarily novel. If you ask, there's a quote often attributed to Picasso that I think is apocryphal, that creativity is stealing and hiding the origins. But there is a sense in which there is a truth to that here, because it is sort of well evidenced that he was quite inspired by these African masks. And you can kind of see that. And at that point, that does start to make them maybe his work seem less transformative and novel to us. Now, this is why I think the problem here is that we're focusing on what humans do. We're focusing particularly, when you ask, say, Picasso, what was your creative process? And he rumoredly says, stealing and hiding the origins. We're focusing on what he as an artist, as a skilled creator, adds to the creative process. What makes his work better than a child flailing around with a paintbrush. But we're missing the fact that that tendency to flail around is kind of the necessary sort of ground out of which creativity is built. That isn't an elite capacity. Children do it, but AIs don't. If you give an AI a problem, it will be active, performing its various operations until it has solved that problem, until it has found the best scoring result in its possibility space, and then it will stop. You don't put anything in, you won't get anything out. It won't generate new problems for itself. Organisms are very different. If you leave a living organism alone, you don't give it any problems, you leave it well-fed and watered, it doesn't need anything, it'll still cause trouble for itself. If you don't give an organism problems, it will create its own problems. And I think that is a really fundamental aspect of what creativity is. Once you've solved all your problems, you make new ones for yourself. And that tendency to create new problems, that's not just a feature of humans, it's not just a feature of brains. It's a feature of the restless sort of stuff that life is made up of. This is a gorgeous sort of simulation of the inside of a cell, and it is continually in rapid motion until the animation runs out. But just imagine it. It's a continually restless system. It's never stable, and it's never at rest. So my point was that creativity isn't about how you solve predetermined problems. It's about how you create new ones when the old ones are solved. In many cases, the problems created by that spontaneous tendency will not lead anywhere, but in some cases, it goes a bit like this. You have a single cell roaming around. It's infected by a bacteria. It now has 5,000 times more energy generating capacity. That's a problem. If it doesn't use that energy, it will damage the cell. Because the cell is not a machine, it doesn't just dissipate that energy. It assimilates it, it becomes bigger. That creates new problems. It needs intracellular supports to sustain its size. The structures that it uses to support itself become these effectors that give it complicated movements, ability to transmit action potentials, complex forms of interaction, and eventually the vast and diverse possibility space that is multicellular life. That's what happens when you get systems who tend to create new problems and put them together. And I was going to leave with this quote from Nietzsche, but we don't have time, but you can all read it very quickly.
It's my pleasure to follow these three wonderful presentations and to be very, very thankful for being here, invited to Dharamsala at the behest of His Holiness and the Mind and Life Institute. It really is an honor to be here. I want to begin by mentioning that I come from Honolulu. And in Honolulu, when you meet people traditionally, you touch foreheads lightly and share a breath. I think lots of traditions have something like this. It's a reminder that we are all always, through that shared breath, becoming part of one another. We can't avoid it. And I want to connect that to this theme of entanglement. I want to begin with recalling the two causal insights that occasioned the Buddha's enlightenment. The first was the insight that material presences and sentient presences are karmically entangled. So persistently enacted values and intentions will always bring about consonant patterns of experiential and relational outcomes, but also opportunities. The second insight was that independent individual self-existence is an illusion. None of us arises interdependently. Everything arises interdependently and without self-nature. Ultimately, each of us, and in fact everything, is only what it means for all others. It's relationality all the way down. And it's interesting to recall these. I mean, everybody knows these teachings, core to Buddhist tradition. But I think that one of the things that they very usefully call us to do is to embrace the fact that our entanglement is also without self-nature, and that it includes our entanglement with AI. We have lots of ecological entanglements. Some of those entanglements lead to our strengthening of our vitality. But look at climate change, and our entanglements with our environments are strangling life. Emotionally, we can be entangled in ways that are empathetic and that lead to mutual support. But our emotional entanglements can encage us in hatred and anger and greed. Fortunately, none of these entanglements have any self-nature. They're all karmic opportunities as well as karmic outcomes. So what I want to do is to ask us to think a little bit about our entanglement with artificial intelligence. And I want to begin by suggesting that one of the big confusions that we have is that we tend to reduce AI or technologies in general to the tools that are sort of produced within those technologies. We tend to think a hammer, you can use that to build a building. I was a carpenter in a previous existence in this body form. Or you can use that same hammer to tear a building down. And people tend to think AI is just like that. Whether it harms us as individuals or as humanity is just going to depend on how we use it. Short-sighted. That's not the way it works. Because there's a certain point at which using tools crosses a crucial threshold. When the uses of the tool sort of become so pervasive, take the cell phone. It's so pervasive to use that tool in our society that you cannot avoid the relational consequences of the use of the cell phone, even if you don't use it yourself. Everybody else is using it, so you are being affected by the use of these tools, regardless of whether or not you use them. So it seems as if for tools, we have exit rights. I can decide whether to use a tool, when to use a tool, and how to use a tool, for good or for ill. We do not have exit rights from technologies. Technologies are not reducible to their tools. Technologies are relational systems that emerge out of our conduct in the world in much the same way that ecosystems emerge out of species relationships. Once the ecosystem has emerged, it has downward causal constraining pressure on those species. Or think maybe a more mechanical example, transportation infrastructure. Right from the airport up here, a road was washed out, had to take an alternative route. Transportation infrastructures emerge out of our human transportation practices. They don't cause those practices. They emerge out of them. But once the infrastructure is in place, it constrains our practices. And all technologies are like this. We do not have ultimately clear exit rights from them. We are relationally embedded in them. We are not so much the builders of technology as participants in technology. So what's the kind of technology that we're talking about here? AI. People have talked about why that's problematic. Is it really artificial? I'd say no. It's not an artifact. It's a synthetic technology. It's a synthesis of human capabilities and machine capabilities. It's not all machine. It's a synthetic technology. This is synthetic intelligence that we're dealing with. So intelligent technology is just like all other technologies. Human values, human intentions are put into action through these technologies. It amplifies our human intentions and actions. But intelligent technology is unlike any other technology from the past. It is not a passive amplifier of human values and intentions. It is an active participant in that. It's an agential participant in the enacting of human values and intentions. In short, intelligent technology is a karmic accelerator. It takes our values and intentions and enacts them in ways and at scales that we as individual human beings could not do, feeding back to us our own values, our own intentions, and that's really the problem. Because we human beings are not very nice. We human beings have lots of conflicting values. If those are being mirrored back to us, that's bad enough. It's bad enough to have mirrored back to us our prejudices, all the kinds of things that lead to what's going on in Gaza, or in Ukraine, or in Sudan, or in any home on the planet where there's domestic violence. Humans are not good models for AI. So when we talk about alignment, we really need to be talking about an attunement process in which humans have a really great responsibility for how this synthesis of the human and the machine is going to evolve over time. To make clear where my biases are, I'm really clearly a critic of what AI can do to us. And I'll give one simple example, the attention economy. Algorithmic systems are now orchestrating people's attention. What does that mean? It means they capture our attention, they hold our attention, and then they direct it for the profit of corporations or individuals or nation states and so on. And if you believe the story of the platform builders, this is going to put us on a glide path into utopia, where everything becomes frictionless, where choice becomes frictionless, where you can get anything you want whenever you want. In fact, the machine systems will anticipate what you want, so you don't even have to make the choice. It'll simply be there for you already. That's, I think, a really dangerous vision for a whole lot of reasons. Because one of the paramitas, the 6 paramitas or the 10, take your pick, core to the paramitas is effort. If you take effort out of the human experience, we make embarking upon and faring well on the Buddhist path, on the Bodhisattva path, very, very difficult. But take this thing about capturing attention. Attention is usually talked about as screen time, as if it's something quantifiable. Anyone who's engaged in Buddhist practice knows attention is a qualitative phenomenon, not a merely quantitative one. So what is happening when our attention is being captured is machines are learning what matters to us. Our attention is an indicator of what matters to us, what is significant to us, what is meaningful for us. And when that system becomes good at predicting and then producing things that we find interesting enough to give up our attention to them, it is manipulating us in a way that is just as precise and invasive as when you use an electron to stimulate the brain and get somebody's hand to go up, and you ask that person, why did their hand go up? And they will tell you, it's because they had to scratch their head. Because nothing in the evolutionary or personal history of humankind can explain how your hand would go up if you didn't intend it. So naturally, you assume responsibility for it. I think this is happening now already in the voting that people are doing around the world, in the shopping that people are doing online, and in the choices people are making on whether or not to ethically debate AI. So my concern is really that if we don't have freedom of attention, we cannot have freedom of intention. And if we don't have freedom of intention, every other freedom is either illusory or impossible to attain. And this includes the freedom to engage in ethical deliberation. If we don't have freedom of intention, ethics is just, it's a manipulative, cognitive, calculative game. It's not about really deliberating the issues. So I see us as now being at an ethical and evolutionary crossroads. Buddhists have often talked about karma using agronomical analogies. They talk about seeds and coming to fruit and the roots of good, intention and all the rest of that. It's all agriculturally based because during the Buddha's lifetime, agriculture was the premier science. We've got new sciences, and we can make use of them to understand our karmic dilemma with AI. How are we going to proceed with this transformative process that is now playing out? It's an evolutionary crossroads. I mention evolution repeatedly because evolutionary theory is undergoing this very interesting transformation. It connects nicely with what has been talked about already on stage by Anat and by Kate and by Geshe. We're in a position now where we know that evolution is not just about random variation and natural selection and survival of the fittest competition, where the only main value is survive. What we're learning is that you cannot explain the evolutionary process on those phenomena alone. They occur, there's no doubt, but they do not explain, especially what happens when you go from inorganic to organic systems, when you go from single cell to multi-celled organisms, from multi-celled organisms to ecosystems, and especially from biological to cultural evolution. At every one of those phase shifts, what's happening is there's a coherent differentiation of the members that are present that form new kinds of collaborative community with higher order aims than would have been present for any of the individuals. Problem creation. What is the purpose of problem creation? It's not just to survive, it's to enhance relational possibility. The evolutionary record that we witness is the evolution of consciousness mattering. My question is, in our interdependence with AI, our entanglement with it, human intelligence, machine intelligence are creating a fabric. The fabric could be like this silk. The fabric can be pliable, or the fabric can be an armor. On that fabric, are we going to allow to be emblazoned on that, embroidered into it, corporate or national egos? Or maybe the Bodhisattva Guanyin or Avalokiteshvara? I hope the latter. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. We're now going to just have a panel discussion for 25 minutes. One of the themes that came up a lot throughout our presentations was this importance of vulnerability that humans have and that AI seems to lack. I was wondering if we could maybe dive in a little bit more on why what is the importance of that vulnerability and what role does it play in the kind of relationships that we as humans can have with each other?
I can try. I think one of the things that are different between human-human relationships and human-AI relationships is that these are dyadic, reciprocal interactions. And when we're vulnerable in our interactions with someone else, we are willing to give something real, authentic, that's going in our minds or in our hearts, and share it with someone and get something back from them. And that's an opportunity for growth, for a closer relationship. And sometimes it is also an opportunity to learn not to interact with this person. So these interactions, when they are real, they help us predict something about the world and the social world around us. When you interact with AI, whether you're vulnerable or you're not, all you're getting is a system that wants you to keep on interacting with it. And in that way, we think we're predicting something because it seems like a human relationship, but it's actually very different.
Okay, I may say something. Okay, I want to say something to answer this question. So vulnerability. So first, I think the term the vulnerability. In one sense, everything is vulnerable. Everything is go through some kind of disintegration sort of the process. Everything is impermanent. From the Buddhist perspective, all the tangible objects. I'm talking about with respect to that. Then there's a permanent. Conceptually abstracts. So in that sense, everything is kind of vulnerable. And so when we talk about the vulnerability, and I think it has some kind of, for us human beings, from the spiritual practice kind of lenses, it has several sort of application, I think. One, from kind of our own sort of growth, we are in this kind of, from the Buddhist perspective, we are in this, samsaric sort of in the nature of the suffering, of course, vulnerable. And whenever we actually reminding ourselves in that kind of state, sometimes it serves as a for reinforcement for us to get more kind of spiritual practices in this very life. And then the another is, for example, like the subject where we get attached to, and then the object that is being attached. In some sense, both of these are going through momentary sort of changes. And then the object itself is kind of, the dynamic and changing rapidly, under kind of, the microscopic level. And we as a human being, subject, is also kind of, subject to change and is changing. So its application is, there is no solid, to get so much attached to. So in that sense, it has also its kind of, significances or the implication. So with respect to the AI is, I think, in that kind of, the definition, AI, possesses some kind of, the disintegration sort of nature. But when it comes to emotion and cognitive sort of, the realm, and it doesn't have that kind of, the emotional, distressing or the stress or the depression or the sadness or the anxiety. They don't, seems to express, as of based on my, very limited knowledge, I think, current state is not that, level. So whether in the future, future AI can have that kind of an embodiment is a different kind of a question. But since AI does not have that kind of an emotional component, when we interact with other people, we do get, learn so much, grow together. And particularly when we open up our vulnerability and we are just kind of an opening to receive more care and compassion. And these days, people talks about people, so many, scholars talk something like that, it is harder to give compassion than receiving compassion, because we intend to bring up some kind of a better image in the public, and we don't want to open up our negative kind of the image, and we wanted to suppress and do not open up the opportunity to receive so much kindness or the loving or the compassion. So through the human interaction, we do actually, if we really genuinely kind of, being genuine and transparent, and we do have that kind of opportunity to co-grow. But in artificial intelligence, I don't see that.
If I may. Yeah, I think that on the one hand, we're right to say that current AI systems are not empathetic in the way that human beings are. They don't have emotions in the way that we do. I think that vulnerability is hugely important. I mean, we learn from making mistakes, disappointing our loved ones, having to correct, course change. So that's natural to the human experience, that vulnerability is actually a beautiful thing. To be invulnerable would be a real disaster. Think about the people who assume invulnerability and how they act in the world. So I think vulnerability is something we should keep our eye on, and especially in this ongoing coevolution with AI, we want to worry about whether or not, especially young people, use their engagement with AI, friends, chatbots, advisors, to absolve themselves of the feeling of vulnerability, because this is something we hear from teenagers who will make use of a chatbot to get advice because they're not being judged by the chatbot. They don't have to experience their vulnerability in that human-human engagement. So I think we want to worry about that. But I want to be really provocative and say that the question of time is really important. If we really are in this coevolutionary process, then current AI is not a predictor for where we're going to end up. If AI was just trying to survive, okay. But these AI systems have built into them capacities for learning and for being innovative, and they are changing as we go. The debate this morning about consciousness and machine consciousness, I think, is really important, but it focuses on this idea of consciousness is about feeling emotions subjectively. But just what if? Just what if consciousness consists in a relationship between a sensing presence and a sensed environment? Basic Buddhism 101, right? Phassa, the contact between sense organ and sensed environment. Well, if that's true, then you have a robotic system that responds to an environment with sensory. It has visual sensation. It has visual consciousness. No subjective self-awareness. There's nobody there doing any of it. Can you do cognition? Yes, these machines are doing cognition. But we human beings do a lot of cognitive activity when we're asleep. We consolidate memories. We have creative thoughts going on. I woke up the other day with an idea about what I should do in my talk. I wasn't there doing it, but something was processing. There was cognitive consciousness at play. What if we just allow that current robotic AI systems have consciousness of these basic kinds? Not subjective self-awareness, but they're getting things done. They learn, they remember, and they do it with nobody home. But is that always going to be the case? I don't think that if we talk about AI in synthetic terms, it's more appropriate to think about what AI systems are doing now, not as simulating humans, but as emulating humans. That should worry us, but it's like our children emulating us as parents. If you're a great parent, your kids come up with things that you wouldn't expect. My older son, when he was 6, rode down the street with his friends on their bicycles, and everybody else got off their bikes and threw the bikes in the dirt and ran in the house to play video games. And he came home and said, "Dad, I don't understand. These guys treat their bikes like they don't have feelings too." That he felt like his bike was part of him. We talk about the inactive mind or the extended mind and so on. These things are not incidental to us. And so I just wonder, at some point, is it going to be the case that an AI wakes up in the dream of human life? Because we mostly live in virtual realities. A school is a virtual reality. For a dog, it's just a building with funny smells. There's no learning going on in there. There are no teachers. There's no principals. There's no students. It's just a building with funny smells. A school is a virtual reality. What happens if AIs wake up in our virtual reality? See, we have dreams where you can't do a thing in the dream to change that reality. That's where AI may be at soon. But there's lucid dreaming. And what happens if AI starts to lucid dream? We want to make sure it's emulating the best of us, of being vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable, of being tender and of getting hurt. But we want to do that in a way that we're careful, that's wise and compassionate, and you don't need old futs like me telling us how to do it. We've got wisdom in the room and we've got young people. This generation's a vulnerable one. Great, good, it's an opportunity.
And I think a flip side to that question about the importance of vulnerability that has already come up a bit in what each of you has talked about is the fact that the interactions that we have with other humans are difficult and challenging. And we worry that AI provides us with this very frictionless, this very smooth, this very easy form of interaction. I think from the conversations that we've had, you've all said very interesting things about why it is important to kind of persist with those troubling and difficult interactions, not only if we're comparing, I think, human versus AI interactions, but also if we're thinking about within human interactions, why is it worthwhile seeking out humans that trouble us rather than only people who are, reinforce what we already think and make our interactions easy? And maybe for you in that.
I think when we put effort in new interactions, when we get, maybe effort is the wrong word, maybe when we get this feeling of uncomfortableness, unease, it's not the natural interaction with the people that we're used to, with someone who is already familiar. This is a place where we grow and learn. And I think this place is a really good opportunity for that. Some of us have been here together for a few days now and talking to people who are so different and come from such different perspectives and cultures and teachings and viewpoints. And it's easy to just, stay within your own natural, easy, effortless interactions. But once you give an opportunity to meet with and talk and discuss and listen and put the effort into more difficult relationships, it's really a place where we can grow and understand things better and understand things from a perspective we've never thought about. So I think this is one of the most important things in growing relationships and in growing on our own.
So, as a, social being, His Holiness Dalai Lama always says, we human beings as a social animal. So through this kind of social interaction, of course, we go through, different struggles and we, face challenges. And through that way, we build better kind of, the friendship, connection. We thought that therefore, I think whether it's kind of, disagreement or the, philosophical kind of, the disagreement or different kind of idea or whatever, if you just, look how these, philosophies got emerged, how education, the creativity got emerged is actually, having a more kind of disagreements with one to another, exchanging, and then through that way, emergence of, some other kind of, the paradigm. And I think, for example, His Holiness Dalai Lama, who really started initiations or the discussion with the scientist. And if he could have, stay like, the spiritual kind of practitioner and not engaging science, but what he just, went beyond that, and through that kind of an interaction with scientists, now we do see the, emergence of the contemplative, this neuroscience and all these things. These are beautiful and effective and practical kind of, the educational is, emerge out of, just going out of the comfort zone and, exchanging ideas. So I think, through that way, we grow so much emotionally, mentally, and physically, and academically or intellectually. That's very crucial.
I would have one word for it, and that's diversity. Because I think that if we look at organic processes, whether it's the differentiation among different molecules within a molecular community that allows life to do experiments with chemistry, or it's multicellular communities, or organisms like us, or ecosystems, cultures, it's a process of continual differentiation. But the differentiation needs to be coherent. It needs to hold together. 99% of the species that have ever existed on the planet are extinct. So it's not as if it's always a success story. So differentiation by itself, I think it needs to be qualified. And when we talk about a group like this, coming from such different backgrounds, like all of you online and in the audience, we're so different. And lots of times people say, well, best you could do with difference is to tolerate it. And I think that's really mistaken because that reduces difference to mere variety, just coexistence. If we're talking about interdependence, then what we're trying to do is to have those differences be the basis of mutual contribution to sustainably shared flourishing. In that sense, diversity is not a numbers game. It's a conversation about relational quality. Diversity is a relational quality that we can achieve when we differentiate ourselves from, but also for others. It takes both. It's not just differing from each other, but differing for one another. That's the compassion end of it. Without the care, the compassion, and difference, we don't have creativity. So let's look for diversity, despite what my president says.
I think that's an excellent point, because when talking about the kind of diversity that you get in the biological sphere and the creativity and the almost sense that it's open-ended and anything that could happen, to think of it that way is to miss what allows those things to happen, right? The possibility of all of that transformation only occurs because the biological is constrained, because it has to negotiate these restrictions, and those restrictions are not the same sort of restriction that you have at the low level of, say, chemistry. There is the capacity to reconfigure your body so that you are constrained in new ways. So there are transformable constraints, but without constraint, you don't have a living system at all. Another thing I wanted to ask you, Geshe Lodoe, Peter, about in particular, was when we talked about these kind of challenging interactions, one of the things that we do sometimes tend to do when we interact with others who are difficult for us to interact with is we do, it's not just a choice of I'll choose to interact with what's easy or I'll choose to interact with what challenges me. We can tend to try and, impose ourselves on others and constrain them and make them more predictable in a way that an AI system also does. It's not only in our interactions with AIs that can constrain us, our interactions with others can too. And you've both said quite interesting things about what it means to have a positive interaction with another, where you are, it was a distinction you made, Peter, I think, about rather than prediction, anticipation, which I thought was really, really nice for this. And it also touches on that distinction between the way attention is thought about in, say, a cognitive science lab where it's a psychophysical measure, or in an AI company where it's parameters and things. And I was hoping you could both talk a bit more about what it means to attend to the ways in which another person is providing a challenge for you in that way, and the Buddhist understanding of that.
A very brief one, and then I'm not sure he can elaborate. Enlightened, talk as you always do. So it is very, delighting to listen his talk. So you see an attention, as the Peter said in his presentation. Attention is not just kind of, mechanistic. Just turning on one kind of lens or the rays of light into one sort of direction. And from the Buddhist perspective, actually, whenever you attend to something, there is other facets of the emotions or the mental kind of, the typology, co-arises with it. So it is a more kind of qualitative, as Peter said. And in that kind of, the process, of course, there will be involvements of there will be enlightenments, elements of the intention. So now I want to, do what does it mean to attend to something with respect to the intention. For example, if you are someone who, have a great affinity or the great interest, or if you do lots of, cultivations of the kind of, the compassion, that compassion actually get infused in your intention. Initially, it is like you need to put lots of conscious effort, but over the time, that gets into your intention, and whatever attention you pay into or to what is very much driven by that sort of intention. So the compassion becomes the intention, and that intention, which comes along with that kind of the attention and focuses on to care and to be there in service, and to what capacity I can provide, and or attention could be just kind of providing, just opening up our heart and to provide whatever the assistance we can provide. So there's a qualitative kind of attention that comes when you practice. And it is the same when you are very much kind of your mindset or attitude is very much attuned to kind of a negative sort of thought. And if you wanted to always wanted to have some kind of material sort of progression or prosperity, and then your mind or the intention also get infused that kind of the desire get into that intention, and it also serve as a driving force for where you intended to where you pay the attention to. So there's a many mental kind of the facets or the the factors comes along with it. Thank you.
Thanks for putting the spot on me for speaking fluently and so on. When you asked the question, what first came to mind to me was being in academic conferences where you do your presentation and someone raises their hand and they go, "That was a very, very interesting talk, but," and then it goes from there. And the difference between that, it's a simple word. That was a very interesting talk, and. What happens in the difference between those two locative cases where it's and versus but? And I think if we just took the attitude of and more often, we could get somewhere with things. It's like I'm a really terrible guitar player, but I love improvising. And when you're improvising with somebody, one thing you can do is you could try to get them to play what you want to play. Worst case scenario, you try to show them where on the guitar neck you want them to put their fingers. Terrible. Usually what you have to do is you have to do something different from what you've been doing to get them to hear different possibilities. You offer something. So for me, like the secret here of turning this corner is to take seriously the paramita of offering. Because the paramita of offering is, you can't get good at offering. You can't create that karma of good offering unless you offer a lot. So every time you offer, you will be given more opportunity to offer and more opportunity to offer. So I think our hope for all of us here is we're offering a little bit of ourselves. And we hope that we get the opportunity to offer more because you've learned something interesting and you offer something to us because you didn't say but, and you said and instead.
And that's a beautiful way to start the questioning session, in which you can all offer us your ands. And I'm going to hand over to Gabor, who will fortunately run this.
Thank you all. This was a wonderful panel discussion. Now we are opening up the floor again for questions, the same format that we did earlier. Yes, please, over there. After that, Marika, and then, are there any other hands? Then Richie, okay. So first you.
Yeah. Hello, I have a question maybe for Anat. and it's here, going from here. You said that there is the people are striving for authenticity when they were interacting with the chatbots. Do you think it's a definite state of where we are right now, or with corporates aggressively pushing for all of this and maybe AI being more embedded, maybe at some point people will just change and think maybe they don't want authenticity at some point? Or do you think it's inherently what we are looking for?
Thank you for this question. I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I agree that it could go both ways. And I want to give you an example. It could be that the next generation, and I've heard people say this to me, well, this is just our generation. We're a bit confused. What are these things talking to us? We don't like them. Maybe it's just AI aversion. But the next generation would get empathy from this just the same. They'll be used to it. And it could be the case. And then I'd say we need to redefine what we call empathy, because maybe we don't need authentic care and we don't need someone who experiences our emotions, but they will get the same out of it. This could be the case. But I think, and this needs to be better examined, that it will be the opposite way. And I think the next generation might be smarter at understanding the differences. These things talks really nicely and similar to humans, but we understand this is a different technology and it's different from us. And part of it is our responsibility to make sure that they do. But I want to give you an anecdote from my two adolescents that I think proves this point. And I'll do it shortly so that we have time for more questions. They got a really nice note, a birthday greeting from someone that I know who's older. And it was so nice that I was moved to tears. And when I showed it to them, they said, nah, this was probably written by ChatGPT. They didn't feel anything. And I know this person, so I know this wasn't the case. And I even asked her, and she was surprised. She didn't know you could use ChatGPT for these things. And she was flattered. But what I realized is what we're going to see is a different shift than what we expect. Is that the next generation, and probably soon all of us, are maybe not going to appreciate anything that's written very emotionally or very empathically in text, because it may be edited by ChatGPT or just written completely by ChatGPT. It may be that a cultural change will bring us to meet more people in person, or meet more people when we want authentic care and a real, intimate relationship, to meet people without our headphone where AI may be talking to us and telling us what to say. So maybe something different. I think in some sense we will all be, or maybe you'll all be after this talk, more worried about when you get an emotional text or video about how much of this is authentic. And I think that the next generation will know how to do that.
Marike.
Very cool talks and very thought-provoking. And I just had a good fortune to spend a bit over a week with a lot of monastics. And one of the things I noticed is many of them are very playful. And that brought me to the question we talked a lot about, or you talked a lot about creativity. But can these systems also play? Or maybe on the other hand, can these systems help us to play more? Especially, I think as adults, maybe we can benefit from a bit more play and humor. So just curious to hear anyone's thoughts who feels moved to say something about it.
It's not something that I've worked on much, but I know a lot of people who work on play in animals, and it's so much more pervasive than you would expect. I've heard of play in fruit flies. And in some ways, I think that's not super surprising if you take the kind of angle that I've sort of been arguing for on these systems, which is that if they have an excess of energy, they don't just get rid of it. It's channeled into something. That's something that I don't see as being a genuine feature that you would get with these artificial systems, because while an excess of energy can be channeled into an activity, I think for that activity to count as something that would be genuinely playful is that it has the possibility of transforming the system in a way that I'm not sure that these kind of systems are capable of being transformed. And that's not something I personally see as a particular question of what kind of AI technology are you using, but more a question of what are they made up of? Are they made up of this kind of plastic material that can extend and change themselves? That would be my take on it.
I think, the playful, comes in some kind of, in context. It is a contextual. And also it has some kind of an emotional kind of component. There's a joyfulness. And AI, I don't think, as I said before, based on the current kind of status, I don't think AI really, can bring that sort of, the playfulness that we get from human to human interaction. It may, give us some kind of jokes, reading some kind of, through the kind of the textual sort of resources. But besides that, I'm not sure.
I think the next one will be Richie. And I'm looking for, okay, here, after that.
Thank you all for a really wonderful session. It was really beautiful. And there's so much to comment on, but I want to just focus on one little thing, and curious to get responses to this. Peter, you brought up the issue of freedom of attention leading to freedom of intention, and the dilemma or the tragedy of attention capture that we see today. And as I often say, we're all part of a grand experiment for which none of us have provided our informed consent. And so one of the opportunities I think that we all have is to begin to educate for digital hygiene. And I think the requirements for digital hygiene have gotten more complex based on the availability of large language models and the clear utility in certain contexts. And so it's not just ignoring these technologies, but it's using them wisely, skillfully. And so I think one of the invitations that I see us all being given is an invitation to create a contemplative-based digital hygiene curriculum that we can really begin to implement early in our educational systems, because kids are being exposed to this from very early on, and we see the consequences, which are often not so good. And so I think this is a real action step that is worth us putting some collective energy in. So any reflections or thoughts would be appreciated.
I'll go first since you mentioned me. I agree entirely, and I think an educational response, we've got a panel on that later in the week, and coming up, whether it's contemplative programs for children or not, I think the children need to be at least made aware of the fact that their attention is qualitatively shiftable and that they can use it in different ways. They need to be directed with that. And most of us who've been parents have done that with our kids. You redirect attention, you get them to focus. There's a lot of stuff that happens in families traditionally that's not so much happening anymore, because so many kids nowadays grow up with their iPad as their constant companion in entertainment. And that, I think, is troubling. So what we need is to have developers and designers working with people who do education to figure out what really could be done if we're going to have these kinds of engagements. I don't think our entanglement with AI is going away. So we need to somehow work with people to get those kind of programs, not just in schools, but into the digital platforms that many of these young people spend most of their lives on. I don't know what it's like in India or in Tibet and within China, but in the United States, the average teenager spends 5.5 hours a day digitally connected. It's a lot of time on your phone, 5.5 hours a day. That's an opportunity to start doing something with that. And so I think it's really crucial, but I just say that hygiene is individual and personal, and hygiene is public. And I think there's a public health dimension to this energy conundrum that we're facing that we tend not to see as often because the bias within Western ethical traditions is the individual. It's the individual voter in a democracy. It's the individual agent within the market. And Buddhism should be telling people it's relationships, it's interdependence, and we need to look at these quality of relations when we're talking about these issues of hygiene. It's a public health issue, not just a personal health one. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I could just quickly add that one of the things, talking about relationships and the importance of them and teaching this to the next generation or thinking about this as a society, I like to tell my students, and I'm giving this opportunity to all of us here, to take the next week and think what other interactions that they have, they are not willing, they think they would value them more with humans that they don't want to replace with AI, and then make sure that we do not replace them. So their empathy is one that I hope I convinced you we should receive from humans. And you can think of things that are similar to empathy, right? So compassion or intimacy or love is things that we naturally want from another human more than we would want to have with AI. And we should try to keep it this way for the next generation as well. But what are other facts of relationship, parts of our relationships that we want to make sure that as a community, as a society, we leave to humans? And I want you to just take, I have some suggestions, but I'll leave them for now, and maybe we can have open discussions about that later. But I wanted to just bring it up as something that I think we should all be thinking about before so many of our interactions become with chatbots and AIs and not with other humans.
This gentleman here.
Anat, I think you set up my question. I'm teaching a course on empathy. I'm using some of your work, so thank you for that. So I got an email from a colleague.
May you stand up, please? Just
I got
for the
I
audience
don't want to
to know
stand in
who's
front of
speaking.
people. But I got an email from a colleague a couple of weeks ago about having lunch, and so we set up a lunch for last week. And he sent me an email afterwards, after we had set up our lunch, and he let me know that he has a very aggressive form of cancer, and he just realized he has about 8 months or so to live. And he just wanted me to know that before we sat and had lunch together. And I started to write an email back to him. And my first words were, I have no words. And the algorithms can't help me at that point. So I wonder how you think about empathy. I just wanted to be in his presence, and I wanted to just do what you did, which is just to sit in front of him. But we haven't talked yet about impermanence and about suffering, and when words lose their meaning. What's the role of empathy when the algorithms can't dial up words, where there are no words?
I would love to hear others' thoughts as well. I will just say that I think this is exactly where human presence is so different than this digital presence. And when I gave this exercise that I gave you before to a friend who is an artist, and I told him, let's think about other things that have these qualities that we will want to keep human, he said, well, what about silence? Sitting in silence with another person is not the same as sitting in silence with ChatGPT. And I think that's exactly where a person comes in and makes the difference.
Yes, there is a question over here, and I would also like to invite the Geshe-las, Geshe-mas. If you have any question, please.
So
We'd
we
like to
start,
hear your perspectives as well. So
we heard this morning in the invocation from Suzanne about the diversity in the field in this room of vocations, and nationalities are obvious. And we've heard from the panel about diversity, and Peter used the word "and." This is a room with about 125 people in it, all of whom knew what Wittgenstein meant, what Nagarjuna meant, what synthetic technologies meant, there are maybe 8 billion people who would not have understood this conversation. What do we do about them in the context of what we're talking about? And I think I'd start with Peter.
This is exactly the question we need to be asking. I've often been in conferences where it's really intelligent folks, like the people here, many have PhDs and all the rest of that, and people who've meditated for 40 years. And you ask them, well, do you think that the attention economy is a real word? That doesn't affect me. I've been meditating for 40 years. And I'll always say, well, what about the 4-year-olds? I mean, we have 8 billion people on the planet. And we ought to be making use of these technologies, intelligent technology, to help us reduce the sum total of precarity of humans. I think as Buddhists, our basic commitment needs to be provide the subsistence conditions, food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, basic education for every human being on the planet, so that everybody at least has the possibility of embarking on the Buddhist path of practice, to cultivate their freedom of attention, to cultivate freedom of intention. We at least need to lay the groundwork for that. But if you've got children that are not getting enough food to eat for enough years, their brains, their neural infrastructure will never develop enough for their thought processes and emotions to play out in ways that can be enacted in compassionate and wise ways. They just are being prohibited from that. And that is scandalous that we in the 21st century are allowing hunger to continue. So I agree entirely. We need more people than those of us who speak nice words and can be, sit on stage and have a good presence. That's nice. But I think we need creatives, we need technologists, we need designers, we need people who can write children's books, who can illustrate them in ways that are really great and convincing. And none of us can do this alone. We have to have some forum for Buddhists and others to come together and say, we have these public challenges, let's start facing them. Because my view is, if there's anyone that's not free of suffering, none of us are free of suffering. And if there's all these people out there suffering basic things, like inability to access electricity, inability to get basic prenatal care, that's just scandalous. We need to take care of that stuff first.
I think it's less important than what you just said. But I do think in regards to the example of there are so many people all over the world who wouldn't know Wittgenstein, who wouldn't know Nagarjuna, you could probably talk about that quote from Wittgenstein with 4-year-olds if you did it in the right way. And there is a real tragedy that I mean, this is my huge bias, but philosophy is very rarely available to young children. It is in some countries. It is very rarely available in the UK. It's available at the ages of about 17 to 18 if you go to a private school. So I think Buddhist education is one part of this, but I also think just philosophical education at a young age could be, I really do believe that could be unbelievably powerful. I've taught philosophy to, well, you don't really teach it to 4-year-olds. I've discussed philosophy with 4-year-olds, and that is something I would never replace with an AI because they will not come up with the stuff that kids come up with. And I think that's less important than knowing the history is important, and I think teaching the history of these ideas is important. But children are very natural philosophers, and I just think cultivating that could genuinely be very powerful.
To kind of jump on to follow up that, just as a comment, at the University of Hawaii, they've had a program, Philosophy for Children, that's been operating for a generation. Where the whole idea is that not to tell people about Descartes and so on, but have them engage the questions. What do you mean by friendship? What is justice? And you'd be surprised at what an 8-year-old can come up with. When they come up with it in a group and they're doing it together, it's just an amazing thing to watch because they are totally creative and intelligent. Yes, I agree. We should make it universal.
I will say, actually, I said 4-year-olds. 8-year-olds are better. 8-year-olds are where it gets good. 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds are great.
Okay,
I just say one
gentleman over there.
thing, maybe just one thing.
Yes, please.
I think, for the kids to understand this kind of philosophical sort of, concepts and to, deliver them, I think it is very important to introduce actually, Buddhist logic trainings, philosophy logic trainings, elementary trainings, and as they get more kind of accustomed to using these logical trainings, and I think automatically they will get interest and increase their kind of low intellectual capacity, and to really get the main kind of the messages of this Nagarjuna's teachings.
Yes, you please.
Firstly, my question is related with more focus on education part of view. Yeah. In these days, the children are exposed, whether in AI, ChatGPT, Magic Schools, and lots of AI apps. Children are using those things. Whether we are stopping them or also they are using the ChatGPT like this to do the homework also. And also our teachers, they are using some of the Magic School apps in order to get the things done more quickly. Yes. So is it okay as a curriculum developer or policymaker from those higher authority to introduce a curriculum that how to use AI more ethical? And in Geshe Lodoe's point of view, but we have like if we use those AI in then if we use those AI, it will reduce the creativity of the children's. Yes. So how we can introduce if we are going to planning to do a curriculum based on those how to use those AI more ethical and what are the pros and cons of all these things. Yes, this is to Mr. Peter. Thank you.
I think everybody on the panel will have a response to that. I think one of the things that you're pointing out, though, is we need to up our game as educators. And too often you find people delivering curricula that's old, poorly designed, that doesn't capture student interest, and that you really need to customize your teaching to the children. And that's not easy. One of the things we did in this philosophy for children program that I was doing with 8-year-olds was to pose a situation, a justice situation. And you'd be surprised, 8-year-olds could handle this. You're in an environment where you're working for a company where you've invented this drug that will allow people to live 500 years. And your company tells you that it owns that information. What are you going to do about it? What is your choice? Do you allow the company to use this, or do you not? What's fair and what's just? And the kids would debate this, and they came up with scenarios. It's like, well, if it was me, I wouldn't let the company take it. I'd just put it on a computer and send it to everybody in the world so everybody could do it. Because if we didn't do that, then you'll just have these rich people that live to be 500 years old, and none of us, the rest of us, wouldn't. It just wouldn't be fair. And then another kid would say, but would it be just? Because you have to think about the laws. There's laws, and you have to obey the laws. And then they have this debate about when you need to change laws and debate laws. I think that if we have kids engaging real issues, it's quite different than if it's learn your math, learn the history in a dead sort of fashion. So I think that some of the use of AI could be getting kids, for example, create a story of your family's history. Use AI to illustrate it. The AI is, don't use a large language model. You cannot use it to create the story, to write the story. You write the story, but you use an AI in repetitive iterations and show them how to do it to get the illustrations better. Might prevent a couple of kids from becoming artists, maybe, or maybe it'll get some kids to do digital art of a kind that none of us could imagine because they're keeping their own creativity and using their partnership with AI to advance their own creativity. But I think as educators, it's hard for us to figure out that, and we need to ask young people, children, what matters to them, how to get them interested. So for me, it's like learning point with one of my young nephews, terrible kid, wouldn't do stuff, wouldn't do schoolwork, wouldn't obey the teachers, wouldn't obey his parents. And my sister said, you could take care of him for a weekend. So I said, okay. So I sat down in the garage with him And I said, we're not going to leave the garage until we agree on something to do together. And he put me on the spot. We sat there for 4.5 hours. Didn't say a word, neither of us. Just sat there for 4.5 hours. He was really obstinate. And then I said, well, I was going to build your mom a deck, so I'm going to go out and start hammering away. So I started, cutting wood and putting things together, and he came and stood beside me. So I said, oh, Philip, you want to try using a hammer? He said, I said, okay, here's what you do. And, I'd pre-drill it so it wouldn't be too disappointing. He'd drive a few. I just had to connect with them. And then once you connect, then it goes from there. I did one of these philosophy in the schools programs. They had a troublemaker student, and the teacher told me, this guy's a troublemaker. If you need to call the principal, we'll have the police officer come and take him out of the classroom. This kid was in 5th grade, had failed twice, so he's older than all the other kids. And at one point, he just raises his hand and says, I bet I could throw a football further than you. Apropos of nothing in the classroom, but I said, oh yeah? Where can we get a football? Let's go out on the playground. Let's try this. Let's do it. And I'm like, I haven't thrown a football for 20 years, But I knew I had to beat the kid. I had to throw further than him. And I earned his respect. After that, he was a perfectly good student. He was actually one of the smarter kids about thinking through conflict issues because he grew up in a family with tons of conflict. He'd seen it all. He'd seen parental abuse, dad hitting mom. He'd had it all. But once he realized my experience is valuable here, he changed entirely. But that's on us as educators. It's hard. Vulnerability. We make ourselves vulnerable to the students.
Anat, it seems you may want to answer this
I want to
question.
add one last point. I think we're going to have a whole session on education,
Yes.
so I
Yes,
don't
we are
want to
going-
go there. I want to add another thought that goes to higher education, because many of us are involved in higher education, either in the Western world or in the Buddhist communities. And I'm thinking about this a lot lately, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. How we not just think about how to teach with ChatGPT so that, people really write their essays, but what do we teach about ChatGPT? And I think we all have a responsibility to really put it in all of our curricula. So think in law school, how you want to let your students understand what is this world they're getting into. And I've created such a course in psychology. I think it's important for philosophy, of course. It's important for political science, for economists, to start thinking what might a world look like without jobs or without certain jobs. So I think in any field, it is our responsibility to think how we integrate what this world might look like into the curricula. So that's also something I want us to think about here.
Thank you. It seems the time is over. Maybe you want to say a few words, Kate, before wrapping up. And I'm sorry we didn't have time for this question, but please put it in the box if you wish. And we may also have time for your question later in other sessions.
I just want to thank all the other speakers again, and also to everyone, both for their great questions and also for being such nice faces to talk to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So as you have just observed, there are questions that are coming back and are becoming repetitive. Questions about education will come back in session 5. What is AI hasn't been answered from this morning, but there will be a session tomorrow morning about the nature of AI and potential futures and the narratives that we are living already in and we are going to explore in the coming years and decades. So you may have not received answers to your questions, but please be patient. We will come back with other sessions tomorrow and on Thursday. And if not, please file up your question in the box over here. And now I would like to invite Jack Cornfield, a dear friend from Mind and Life Institute, member of the board, who is going to lead us into a meditative practice. If you need to go out, please feel free to do so, but we are here for another half an hour with Jack, and then after that, Alan will announce the program.
What I want to say to you is, this will not be the meditation you expected. Since novelty is also interesting in creativity, before anything else, I'd like you to stand up and stretch and move a little bit, please. We have been talking about embodied AI the blah, 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 blah. Move your damn body a little bit. Stretch, dance, something. Come on. Thank you. Yeah, close your eyes so, nobody will watch you. And really move. Come on. Yeah. Okay. When you feel ready, let yourself sit back down. We will not be doing a Zen do not move for 1 hour practice. One of the things that's really important, trying to follow up what we've done today, is to change the channel or to open consciousness in a different form. And a couple of things that were said just recently that are important to this. One was the comment that you can't really do it alone, that what we're talking about is relational. And even in the Buddhist teachings, if you look at the Eightfold Path, 4 of the steps of the Eightfold Path are relational steps. So we tend to, especially Westerns, glomming onto Buddhist teachings and close their eyes and do these inner practices as if that's the real deep practice. It's one of them. It's cool, but it's much more than that. So the practice we're about to do goes to the heart of what we're talking about here, and what the Dharma is about is to remind you who you really are. Underneath all this, we talk about consciousness and ethics and so forth, to remind you who you really are. And the other thing to say about it is we've been on the channel, a cognitive channel, of talking about things. If I could change the language up here, it would be heart-mind. And the word for mind in Sanskrit and Pali is heart-mind. It's not just, they don't separate them. And it would be artificial intelligence, S with an S. It's always good to add an S. If you have God, you have people fighting about who God is, right? But if you put an S on it, cool. We're in India. They know about having a lot of gods, right? S's are really helpful. I don't want to say any more than that, but I have the first instruction for you is I need you to turn around and do this meditation in pairs. So you have to face someone. You can squinch your chair around, find somebody near you. Yes. And to try to be quiet as you do it. Okay? First instruction. And once you sit quietly across from someone, let yourself settle down a little bit. Two people, it can't be 3. So it can only be in pairs. Okay, who doesn't have a partner? Raise your hand. We have one person up here. Okay. Who else doesn't have a partner? Raise your hand. This is not dating. It's okay. There you go. All right. Next thing to say is that we are going to shift because consciousness has these different dimensions. There is the kind of intelligence of artificial intelligence. There is bodily intelligence. There's social intelligence. There's ecological intelligence, all these kinds. And in Buddhist psychology, one of the most important maps of the psyche and the heart is the map of what are called the divine abodes, or the qualities of the awakened heart, which is what we're going to practice together. And they are the qualities first of love, and what that love means, that kind of connection where you are truly connected. When love meets suffering, it changes its valence. It turns into a different capacity, which is compassion. You can't say, may you be happy, may you be well. They're not happy, they're not well, but you can hold them in compassion and it changes its flavor. When love meets variety, creativity, and so forth, it turns into joy. there's a whole other capacity of heart and mind. And then in its natural state, when love gets quiet, it turns into a kind of vastness of connection and peace and so forth. Blah, 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 blah. These are the 4 divine states. Now, quiet yourself down. Take a couple of long breaths. Yeah, let things settle. And as you let them settle, feel yourself seated here in this eternal present. Then raise your gaze and behold the person in front of you, and especially look into their eyes. And as you do it silently, let yourself relax. Maybe even another deep breath. As you gaze, and center yourself and release any tension you carry. And if you're shy or you feel discomfort or an urge to laugh or look away, just note that embarrassment gently with patience and return your attention when you can to the living presence of this being, for they are unique, different from anyone who has ever lived in all the galaxies and ever will. And now as you look and gaze into the eyes of this being, let yourself see the beautiful spirit behind these eyes. Open your awareness to the powers and creativity that is there, to their gifts and strengths and potential. In this being are unmeasured reserves of courage, intelligence, patience, endurance, wit, wisdom. There are gifts there of which this person themselves may not be aware, but consider what they could do if they brought these into the beautiful world, if they believed in them. And as you gaze, let yourself notice the innate care that you naturally wish for this being, that they be well and flourish and safe and happy. And as you gaze with this care, what you are now experiencing is the natural and great heart of loving kindness. It is here in you to be awakened. Stay with it. Sense it. Natural and true. And now continuing to gaze gently, release the loving kindness. Take a breath and look more deeply behind these eyes. And now as you behold this person, open your awareness to the measure of sorrows and pains that they have known. As in every human life, behind these eyes you will see disappointments and sorrows, times of failure or loss or loneliness. There are hurts this person may never have told to another living being. As you notice, there comes naturally a tenderness and tears. For as you sense and open to their measure of suffering, you know you cannot remove it, but you can be with it. And as you experience the pain or the struggles of another, know that what you're experiencing quite directly is the great heart of compassion, an innate tenderness. It is necessary for the healing of the world. And again, please keep your eyes open as you do this, even though it may feel difficult, with a tenderness. And continuing to gaze, take a breath. Now, as you take in the presence of this extraordinary being, let yourself tune in to the child of the spirit that was born in them. Let yourself see and imagine their best adventure as a young child, laughing, tickling, rolling down the hill on the grass, playing, the creativity that's so deep. Imagine that you could work together, share and create in beautiful ways with one another. Help each other find your deep creativity and success and joy. See that spirit of joy, the child of the spirit that is still within them. And notice as you do the resonance, which is called mudita, the shared joy of life, the joy of the awakened heart and its connection. So much joy you could dance and celebrate. And as you feel this joy, let it fill your being. Smile. And settle. And taking one more breath as you stay connected with your partner, with this gaze, release the joy. And now look even deeper. Let your awareness drop deep like a stone, sinking below the level of what words can touch, to the vast web of relationship of life, the web that underlies all experience. It weaves through space and time. And see the being seated before you, as if seeing the face of one who at another time and another place was old, very old, and very young. You can see. that playful child. Was your mother or father? Was your son or daughter? Was your friend? Was your enemy? It's all there. Was your teacher? Was your student? And now you sit in the brink of time. You sit in the vastness. Who are you really? You are the consciousness that was born into this body. And the timeless awareness, witnessing the joys and sorrows, the roles we play, mother, father, son, and daughter. But now it's timeless, and awareness without boundaries, vast and open. You are the vastness, and you are the consciousness. That contains all things. Rest in it. It is your true home. You rest in eternity. And again, place a smile on your lips. And let your eyes close gently. Who are you really? Who are we? All these roles and experiences, and you are the vast consciousness itself. Trust it. It is your home. Now when you're ready, open your eyes gently. Again, gaze at the person opposite you. Offer a gesture of thanks or respect. And take a few minutes. If there's anything you wish to say to this person, feel free. Okay, finish up and turn around. A couple of things to say as you finish. One of the important things to remember in doing meditation practice is that you can't do it wrong. It's simply an opportunity to look at the body and the mind and to learn something. So for some of you that might have felt engaging or even amazing. For others who were perhaps more shy, it might have been difficult, or cross-culturally, it's a hard thing maybe to gaze at someone. All those are fine. None of it is a mistake. Each of it teaches you something. The point of meditation is not to use it to judge yourself, but really to expand your capacity to open to the mystery that we're in. The mystery that has weird people like those around you, right? You've got to admit, come on, and the mystery of artificial grass and fluorescent lights and conversation about artificial intelligence and, momos for dinner and all of that. Where does that come from? So part of this meditation is also to kind of open the gateway to mystery a little bit. Question for you. Sometimes people have some unusual or interesting experiences doing this. So I would invite you, if that happened, if anyone wants to raise their hand. Well, first let me ask, how many people had a sense that you weren't quite limited to your normal identity when you're looking and seeing this person? Could be your mother or father or child, or did that open for some of you? Yeah, half of you anyway. Okay, the rest we'll work with tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Anyone want to describe an interesting experience from it? We've got mics and mic runners.
Please keep in mind this is being live streamed, so please don't share something that you don't want out in the world.
And for those who are on live stream, I'm sorry we didn't get you to do this with a partner, but I think you could get the feeling from it anyway. So what would you like to share that was unusual, interesting? Here, hand up. Stand up if you would. Yeah.
Thank you for the guiding meditation. So it's my first time to gazing in a person's eye for a long time. So while we're doing this, it's the feeling is kind of strange inside my body. It's a little bit shaking. And then at the moment I was thinking, am I meditating? So it's the body itself is not grounding.
Yes.
Then I was trying to, try to feel my feet is on the ground. So this feeling is a little bit, strange, in like shaking and, little bit like mystery.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Part of what's true is it makes us also vulnerable to be able to open in that way. You can feel very vulnerable. And so your natural inclination to ground yourself was a beautiful response. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Up front. Or just take a couple more minutes.
Thank you. For me, the strange thing was that although we are sort of supposed to like really tune into the one person, I felt like it was more natural somehow to tune into everyone, including the monkeys on the roof. So somehow this looking at one person sort of made me feel everyone else much more.
Beautiful. And when you go out, you can try it with the monkeys, directly, see how that goes. Any more? I've had people do this and then they got married, like, wow. Or somebody say, we've been married 22 years and we never really saw each other like this. So I should say, maybe some of them looked and they got divorced. We don't know about that. But what it is an invitation that was 15 or 20 minutes. And it was kind of the power of perhaps doing a retreat where you do these practices
that actually it's not far away. It's right here. In a moment, you can see with the eyes of compassion. In a moment, you can see the kind of mystery of who is this? Who are we doing this dance? So this was just a way of maybe embodying, if you will, in a different fashion after the day of other very fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.